my name is Sonia. I'm 16, and you won't believe what happened when I came out as gay to my family. I'll tell you the whole story, but let's start at the beginning. I first realized I was attracted to girls the summer before I started high school. When all the other girls were giggling over the boys at the pool, I kept thinking about this girl, Maddy, on the swim team. I thought about her all the time, and I'd get fuzzy in my stomach when I talked to her. I told my best friend Amanda how I was feeling, and she started teasing me that I had a crush on Maddy. I was so embarrassed. How did she figure it out? But she stopped teasing me. In fact, she told me I should ask her out, which of course was terrifying. I mean, what if Maddy laughed at me, or said no, or told everyone I'd asked her out? Oh my god. Amanda just shook her head and said it'd be the same as if a boy turned me down. And she was right. So we spent the rest of the night planning how I was going to ask Maddy out. My mother must have heard some of it, because the next day she told me I could wear some of her perfume. Anyway, after swim team, I put on some of that perfume and walked right on up to Maddy. And couldn't say anything. I mean, nothing. Not even hi. I just stood there, frozen, my hands feeling all sweaty. Maddy looked up at me and gave a little laugh. "Hi," she said, and raised her eyebrows. "You want something?" I mumbled something silly, but finally, I asked her if she wanted to go to the mall that weekend, and she said yes. Turns out she'd been wanting to ask me out, too. We really hit it off, and we've been together for over a year now. She always said she thinks it was cute that I wore perfume just for her. My mom always said it was her perfume that helped me get a boyfriend. Yeah. My family don't know that my boyfriend was my girlfriend. I hadn't come out and told them that I was lesbian. Maddy would come over for dinner all the time, and when she'd leave, my parents would always comment about how close we were. It drove me crazy. Maddy had already told her family. Why couldn't I tell mine? So one night, Maddy was over for a sleepover. We were all at the table eating pizza when I just blurted it out. "No, we need to talk," or "I've got something to tell you," just, "Maddy's my girlfriend." My parents kind of smiled and looked at each other, a little confused. "Of course she is, honey." "No, Maddy is like my boyfriend, but my girlfriend." My little brother laughed out loud. "Freaking called it," he shouted. I looked to Maddy for help. She just nodded and took hold of my hand. Dad started to say he understood and was happy for us, but Mom cut him off. She had this blank look and just stopped eating. Then she told us Maddy couldn't spend the night. She'd sent some pizza home with her, but Maddy had to leave. It was crazy. My mom changed right in front of my eyes. She was always so funny and loving, but now she was just like a robot. She wouldn't even look at Maddy or me. I wanted to argue, but Maddy just said thank you, and that her mother needed her home early tomorrow anyway. My mother didn't talk to me for the rest of that night, and all the next day. She was raised in a very religious family, and her religion's views on homosexuality were not very accepting. She started praying all the time, and I honestly started to think she might throw me out of the house. It broke my heart. I called Maddy, crying on the phone, and said I wish I'd never told my mom, but Maddy convinced me I did the right thing, and anyway, my father would never let that happen. I had to get out of the house. So Sunday we went to the pool to relax. When I came home, my mother was sitting there in the living room with a priest. They both smiled at me when I came in, and my mom introduced me to Father Browning, who, get this, specialized in exorcisms. My mother, days after I came out to her as gay, had called an exorcist to perform an exorcism on me. How could she? She had this weird, concerned but hopeful look in her eyes, gripping her rosary and Bible. I started to cry. Is this what she thought about me? I was furious. I sprinted out of the house. The priest and my mom tried to follow me, but I had already hopped in the car and tore out of the driveway. I drove around, and eventually ended up at Maddy's. I tried to dry my eyes before she opened the door. She hugged me as soon as she saw me, and I started crying all over again. Eventually, I calmed down enough to tell her what had happened, and she burst out laughing. After a minute, I did too. I mean, how crazy was it that my mother thought the reason I was gay was that I was possessed? Then Maddy got an idea. What if I actually went through with the exorcism? I was a little confused, but then she laid out the plan, and it was awesome. I live in an old house that has a dumbwaiter that goes from upstairs to downstairs. Our walls are pretty thin, so if you get in and move around, you can make the walls shake. My mother's always told us to be careful not to knock the pictures off the walls. Maddy's plan was to get inside and make it seem like a real demon was in the house. We laughed so hard. I couldn't wait. So we drove back to my house and I dropped her off around the block so she could sneak through the back door. When I pulled into the driveway, the exorcist looked like he was getting ready to leave, but my mom saw me and she dragged us both back inside. I got a text from Maddy. She was in position. The exorcist was explaining what we were going to do. My heart was racing. I laid down on the sofa and closed my eyes. He had his hand on my head and began reciting his exorcism script. And then the pictures on the wall started to shake. Soon the house echoed with the banging coming from inside the walls. My mother was clutching me and the priest just continued, totally unfazed. Maddy pounded louder until the picture started falling off the wall. I thought my mother was going to faint. Finally, the exorcist was finished. Maddy stopped too. Mission accomplished. She slipped out the back and texted me to meet up later to check out the videos she took. That was going to be fun, but the best part? When the exorcist was leaving, he told my mother that it was the house that was possessed, not me, and that everything would be all right now. My mother was confused, and I hid a smile, and then she turned to me with a look in her eyes I will never forget. Why did I think I needed to fix you? Then she just went to the kitchen and started to make dinner, and finally looked over at me and asked, "Wanna help me?" I realized I was crying. I just nodded and hugged her. Things are better these days. My mom's working to understand. She asks questions now and then and tells me to keep inviting Maddy over. Slowly but surely we're smoothing things out. I know my mother loves me, nothing can change that. And I love her too, and nothing can change that either. So that's my story of coming out. Pretty strange, right? Do you have any crazy stories about your parents taking things a little too far? Leave them in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe for more crazy stories.